Good morning, this is Alka Kurian. Welcome to Writers and Filmmakers. This is the first of our special series where we bring to you conversations with writers and filmmakers of color based in the United States and globally. This program is produced by UWaveRadio, University of Washington, Bothell. We have here with us today Saad Khan, a young Pakistani documentary filmmaker from Islamabad. Saad will be talking to us about his film Chup and Chupai, translated as Hide and Seek, and his new documentary film called Zun, Showgirls of Pakistan. Welcome to the program, Saad.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
We're really delighted that you are with us today. And I've had the pleasure of watching your film Hide and Seek many times. First of all, at the Spheres Organized Film Festival last year, which was a huge success and also a little bit controversial. And we'll talk about the controversy, why that happened. And then I had the pleasure of being able to screen your film for my class on feminist studies, which again, as you could see, it was screened in this building and it was massive success. And students later on, they gave me lots and lots of compliments to be passed on to you. So but before we start talking about film and your films, I'm interested to know, why is it that you decided to become a filmmaker?
Well, it's a long story. I mean, if you want, I can cut it short, but it's not going to be as interesting. But I grew up in Lahore. And I live in Islamabad now. But when I was a kid, I was totally a couch potato. And I now make a conscious effort not to watch TV because I think it, it kind of dumbs you down. But when I was a kid, I used to watch TV a lot. And we used to have this terrestrial channel that used to play, it used to start in the morning with CNN programming, then BBC, then Cartoon Network, and at night there was TNT. So there was this one night and my parents were out. And I watched this film. It was. I think the word would be that I was really fascinated to see what it was. That was probably the first film that I ever remember that I watched. And I was running in the house just to wake someone up to read the title to me, because in the break, you see the title on the screen, and I couldn't read at that point. I was 3 or 4, and when my mom got back, I told her what I watched, and she was she didn't know about the film. And for the coming years, I would hop on this metal chest which had our TV, and I would peep in the TV box and find those characters because I wanted to know. I was so attached to those characters, and I was where's Dorothy, and where are all of those characters? And I used to explain it to my mom, and my mom was like, this is not how it works. The broadcast media doesn't work like this, and it works like that. And I was never able to understand. And I didn't want to buy that. You don't want to buy that, and you want to believe whatever you want to believe, which also kind of, people tell me I'm really willful,
I can tell.
So I kept on, I know people in my house used to go to sleep, and I used to hop on that metal chest and just peep into that box for, I don't know, minutes and minutes, and just feel the heat. And that's pretty much it. And when I was 11, I started reading newspaper. And there was this one time where there was this little blurb in the local newspaper which said that Dorothy's red slippers are being auctioned at Sotheby's. And it had a picture of Dorothy and the Tin Man and the red slippers. And I just got to know it was the Wizard of Oz. But since then I kind of knew, because I was more curious about how this thing is working. We didn't have cinema, so we used to watch movies on TV, and later on laptops. So it was just this interest in how this thing is working. Are these characters in my TV? How is this thing working? So I knew that I wanted to do something behind the camera. It's just that when I grew up, I just wanted to tell stories which are around me, and which kind of fascinate me. And what is a better way to tell it through documentary?
Mm-hmm. But were you able to tell your family that you wanted to be a filmmaker?
They knew from the very beginning. It was not only, they didn't know what a filmmaker was, but they knew that I was going to do something in media. They were, they thought I was going to be an actor or something, or a writer or a director. My mom used to explain those things to me, like what a director is, what a producer is. and I mean I would try to understand. Yeah, but I mean, I never got any media education or anything. But maybe the media education initially that I got was through my mom. I was in my third grade when I remember when I watched the first Urdu language like TV show, and it had credits rolling, and I couldn't even read that much, you know. I was really bad at reading Urdu.
Oh, but you were only 3 at that time.
No, in my third grade.
Oh, in your third grade, sorry.
In my third grade, I remember. Because when we were kids, we would watch, you know, all of these English language TV shows. But when I was in my third grade, we started watching, like, Urdu language dramas because I think at that time we used to be awake late at night, you know? So late at night, you have TV dramas. And I was like, what is that? I mean, she was like, these are credits, you know. That's the director and that's the producer and yada, yada, yada.
So then when did you make the transition? Because you said that you didn't receive any education in media or filmmaking in Pakistan.
Yeah.
When did you make the transition? When did you actually, when were you able to lay your hands on
a camera?
On a camera.
So, yeah. As I told you, we never had cinemas. So, I mean, I was exposed to a whole lot of films and, you know, initially through TV, and then thanks to the internet or the dial-up internet, I mean, we used to, you know, we were exposed to a whole lot of international media. I think I was in my 11th grade, or I was in high school when I got my scholarship money, and through that scholarship money, I got this camera,
Mm-hmm.
and then I came in college. In my first year of college, I came to the U.S. and I used to have my camera with me all the time. I'm not even kidding you. And it was like people initially are always a little iffy to be around me, you know, and they were kind of iffy, but they kind of got used to it, and I used to shoot so much stuff, and in the end I used to come up with like small, very interesting short documentaries or short videos, which is kind of slice of life. So I think that was like my first I got a camera through my scholarship money, and that's how I started shooting, and that was pretty much it.
That's great. And what inspired you to make this film, Hide and Seek? Which, as we all know, is an award-winning film. You won several awards.
We won 2 awards. We won the best documentary award at the Mumbai Queer Film Festival, and the Human Rights Award in Librecine, Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
We've played in 35 venues around the globe.
That's fantastic.
It's about transgender and gay community in Pakistan. It's actually about like 4 individuals. We have a dancing boy from Karachi who openly lives with his boyfriend. We also have a transgender activist from Lahore who rallied to introduce a 3rd gender law in Pakistan, which means that we have 3 options on our identity card. We have the male, 3 gender options. We have the male, female, and the 3rd gender option. Which again it's a big debate, but it's there. Maybe it's a step towards acceptance of LGBT rights.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a transgender law student who took the decision to castrate himself under the table because it's not allowed, and he wasn't allowed to fully transition by her college, and she's regretting
Mm-hmm.
the transition. And we also have a closeted wedding entertainer. So it's these 4 characters, and we follow their lives, and they talk about their lives, and they're being really, really brutally honest about, because we spent a lot of time with them, and what turned out was something which was really candid.
Mm-hmm. But I'm curious to know why this topic.
So when I was again, there's another story. When I was a kid, again, when I was in Lahore, transgender people used to come, like their clans, because they move around in clans, they would come and dance in the street, in my street, and they dance on just like in India, they dance on childbirth and weddings, and sometimes they would, to be honest, in the 90s they would just show up They would just show up.
At
and
most celebrations.
Not even like, they do show up at celebrations, but I remember in the 90s, like even when I was at home, they would just show up in the street and they would just start dancing, and people would appreciate it, especially women would give them money, you know. Now it just doesn't happen because now you have a guard outside of every gate, so they don't let them in, and also the culture is kind of dying.
But you'd have a guard outside middle class homes.
You would have a guard outside of middle class families, but also you have to realize that due to the security situation, it's just that it's kind of hard for them to move around as well, because they're not allowed to move around as freely as they used to in the 90s, because they can't enter shops, they can't, they're harassed more. There are more checkpoints. There are more checkpoints in the city. It's hard for them to move. But in the 90s, it was totally fine. So they would show up in the street, they would dance. I was a kid. I would even like lock my door but peep outside of my window to see what they're doing. And it was so fascinating because they're all made up, and it seems like they're different than us. And that's what I was told, because I come from a middle class family. That's what I was told, that they are different, but they're ostracized and they live on the fringes, and but then again, everyone kind of appreciates their art, There was this one time when these two transgender people were sitting on the curb or the doorstep of my neighbors, and I was again in my window, and I was hearing one had like long hair, and the other one asked, "What's the secret of your long hair?" And she was like, "It's papaya shampoo." And that was the first time I kind of heard them in a very like like they were talking in a normal way, That was a dialogue between two human beings. So that kind of made me realize that they're just like us. The memory is so vivid in my head that kind of breaks all the kind of the mysterious kind of notions around whatever they were doing, because they would show up, they would do this thing, they would get money, and they would go. Mm-hmm. And they would do the kind of like the banter, the kind of flirtatious kind of thing that they have going on. But this was one time when they were just being themselves.
Right. So, so would you say that there is an element of transition now? Because of the four characters that you follow in the film, it's only Neeli and Kami that dance, albeit they perform dances in a very different context. Mm-hmm. Neeli comes across as more authentic in the sense that she has sort of carried forward the traditional art of singing and dancing, mm-hmm. as compared to Kami, who comes across as more cosmopolitan. Mm-hmm. You could mistake her for she doesn't clearly identify herself as a transgender person. Kami, not always.
Yeah, Kami, someone put it in a way that Kami could be any dancer somewhere in like East Village in New York, because he is, as you put it, very cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
As compared to traditional Neeli, who is a traditional Khwaja Sara, traditional transgender.
So talking about Khwaja Sara, can you actually describe that expression? And also if you could talk to us about the term hijra.
So hijra is an ancient South Asian term which refers to eunuchs in South Asia, but both of them are now considered derogatory. So the new term that we use in Pakistan, at least, is Khwaja Sara, which is respectful because it comes from Khwaja Amir Khusro, this philosopher, and now we don't use eunuch, we don't use hijra. Hijra is an umbrella term in which we put all the sexualities, whatever is not heteronormative, we just use the word hijra as an umbrella term. Things are kind of changing. People are kind of getting to know about like the term gay or lesbian or bisexual, but the visibility is extremely low, whereas the transgender people or the Khwaja Saras, they beg on the streets and they dance on weddings and childbirth, so their visibility is really high. But for normal people to understand, they would just they would just call anything non-heteronormative, they would just put it under the Hijra or the Khwaja Sara umbrella. So, yeah.
Okay. But it's an absolutely fascinating story that you offer to the audience. Could you talk to us a little bit about Neeli, who I see as some kind of a political activist, as a representative of the Khwaja Sara community in Pakistan?
So Neeli she's a transgender activist, a Khwaja Sara activist. She works for an NGO in Lahore, and she works for the betterment of the community. She herself ran away from home when she was 9, which is, I mean, she belonged to a very lower middle class family in a village, and then she started dancing. It's just that now she's older and she wants to give back to the community. What she does is she tries to help transgender people around her city and also around her area. For example, if someone needs an ID card, or someone needs a passport, or if someone needs a job, she would use her contacts to get that person a job or an ID card or a passport. She's very well connected in the media and also the government. So she's using that. She's very active that way, and she wants to come into politics. So thanks to the third gender law, they can now run for elections. In the last elections, we had at least 3 transgender people running for elections across Pakistan. So I think that's interesting. So Neeli, that way, she's very determined. She's very open, and she can be open because she falls into that traditional transgender or Khwaja Sara category, which people don't. I mean, people do frown upon it and all of that, but they're kind of used to that thing as well because of the historical perspective of Hijras or Khwaja Saras in South Asia.
Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting to actually then see the way in which Neeli is able to assert her identity in a very empowered manner. And I wonder whether that's because she decided to maintain the historical identity of the Khwaja Sara, unlike someone like Kami, who decides... Or Jenny. Who both of them... in fact, so this is some kind of an internal hierarchy within the LGBT community where someone like Kami and Jenny would like to distance themselves from the dancing and the singing Khwaja Sara because they don't... I think they clearly, or at least one of them says, I don't see myself as a beggar. I don't want to sort of earn a livelihood. Yeah. Jenny says, I don't want to earn my livelihood begging and singing and dancing on the streets. And she wanted to actually pursue a career in law. So while Neeli comes across as extremely empowered, Kami too comes across as extremely empowered because
opinionated, at least. He has a lot of opinions. But Jenny, on the other hand, who apparently is... She thinks that she's... she calls herself a modern transgender, I'm quoting her here, those transgender people who go into bars and who chill out and have fun. So she considers herself to be really modern. Yet again, she is kind of... she's very affected by the society, and she's not able to do the stuff that she wants to do because she is kind of... She herself, I mean... due to what's going on, I mean, she's a transgender herself. It's she's on the fringes, but she's also kind of pushing away the only help that she can get from the traditional transgender community, which means that it isolates her even more.
So she's doubly marginalized.
Extremely.
Yeah,
yes.
So it's some kind of a self-imposed marginalization. Yes. So what do you think, as you were talking about the ways in which the Khwaja Sara are increasingly facing barriers to perform the traditional kinds of strategies that enable them to survive in the society, for example, singing and dancing at weddings and other happy moments in people's lives. So what do you think is the outcome? So do you think people are eventually going to be hiding their identity? Because someone like Jenny clearly tries to hide her Khwaja Sara identity by normalizing her appearance. Yeah? So is that a way forward, or what's going to happen?
So I think Khwaja Sara is a very cultural term. If Jenny does not call herself a Khwaja Sara, and it's absolutely fine. I mean, she is what she is. She's more she's more like a Western transgender person.
Yeah.
Because she feels that way. She operates that way. It's just that it's sad that she is in a country, or she has the surroundings in which she can't operate that well.
Mm-hmm.
And she's affected by that. She's affected by the political, religious, cultural bigotry,
Mm-hmm.
which is not helping her to be who she is, or to be out in the open. Whereas Neely, she wants to connect to the cultural roots of the Hijras or the Khwaja Saraz, and that's her prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, on the other hand, doesn't want. It's just that to be very honest, I mean, in both the cases, nothing is in favor of these two people, but Neely is trying to make it work,
Mm-hmm.
thanks to the historical context of Khwaja Saraz.
That's right. Talk to us a little bit about Wasim.
Yeah,
He comes across as a fascinating character. He has, he's exceptionally beautiful, and he dresses, in a very beautiful traditional Pashtun outfit. Is that?
I mean, he's he calls it they came from Rajasthan, so there are a lot of kind of mixed. It's not Pashtun, because Pashtun they don't it's a very kind of quote unquote macho culture, so they would not dress in glitzy garb. So what he's doing is, I don't know, it's just traditional. It's kind of it's androgynous. That's how I can see it. Like how he dresses up is very androgynous.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a wedding entertainer, and that's how he makes his money. He's very pretty, and he puts on that garb, and he sells pawn and sometimes dance or sing. His voice is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So it's really interesting to see the ways in which none of the characters, except perhaps occasionally someone like Jenny, who is deeply remorseful of having had, undergone a kind of an incomplete transition.
Yeah. She was castrated.
She was castrated. And Wasim, even though he's aware of his, brutalization by his uncle, he seems to have made peace with his life now. So none of these characters actually come across as victimized, living that despite the fact that they live in a country where the Sharia law forbids homosexuality, and the society, frowns upon them.
I would say even it might be like really not right to say that only the Sharia law forbids homosexuality. The anti-homosexuality laws were introduced by the British when they came. Before that, sexuality was very fluid. The kings or the people who were important in the government, they would have harems full of women, but they would also have, liaisons with men or boys, and it was fine. Sexuality was very fluid, not only in South Asia but also in the Arab world, and it kind of still is, in the lower echelons of the society if you don't talk about it, if you don't label it. But it's just when the British came, they introduced this, was it Article 377, which India is trying to get rid of as well, which luckily India did a few years back, but it's reintroduced. So in Pakistan, what happened was that after the Islamization, they kind of used those laws and adulterated them with the Sharia law, or with those extremist laws, and it just came out to be just something really bad. It's just that the penalties are based on Sharia, but the basis of it is it's introduced by the British.
Right. So you're talking about penalties. Can you give some more details? What kind of penalties might they incur?
In the law, it's lashes and incarceration. It rarely happens. People do get caught. If people do get caught, which is, recently there have been so many examples. If they're rich, they can bribe their way out, and if they're not, they're beaten up. Because you're dealing with homophobia of the policemen or the
law enforcement authorities.
The law enforcement authorities, you're also dealing with them. I mean, for example, Kami says that she's afraid now to walk on the streets right after the American embassy did this quote unquote pride parade, and then they made the mistake to have a press release, which led to the political parties or the religious parties to kind of capitalize on that and kind of propagate their own agenda, which kind of led to, you know, having posters and banners across big cities, you know, asking the U.S. government to the U.S. embassy to shut down, and also the LGBT people. They were like they should be killed because it's not natural. So which means that people got to know about the term gay, people got to know about the term LGBT, but in a very negative context, or it had a very negative connotation because it was introduced. I mean, you have the U.S. embassy attached to it, right? It's deemed as a Western invasion, or as a Western idea. So Kami now talks about like how he feels that he can get arrested any time because of the way he is. He cross-dresses on the street, and then they can rape him. They can do whatever they want to do with him because it's what the people of this land kind of want. People of this land, I mean, like the law enforcing agencies. They're not doing anything. I mean, what are they doing? Did they do anything against those anti-LGBT or banners? They didn't. So, which means that there's this tacit kind of approval to kind of target them.
But do you think Neely faces a similar kind of public or legal persecution in a way that Kami and Jenny fear all the time?
Not so legal, because, as I said, Khwaja Saras are more visible in the society. But when it comes to public kind of, people frowning on who she is, of course it's there. She cross-dresses, or she dresses into a male drag and rides a bike to places, because if she does that in the way she is, if she does that in women's clothes, people would, I would quote her here, would torture her. She uses that word, torture, which is extreme, you're using the word torture. So that's why she hides her long hair under a cap.
A helmet or a cap.
A cap and a helmet, and then she would dress up in shalwar kameez, a male garb, and she would ride the bike to places. So, of course, I mean, it's when something is kind of I would not say alternative, but not like not heteronormative. It's you never know. Obviously you're going to be frowned upon.
Yeah, excellent. Shall we move over to your new film that you're making called Zan, Showgirls of Pakistan? Can you give us some details about what it's about, and also what inspired you to make a transition now from that theme to this theme?
So, I don't know, someone said, and I was giving a workshop a couple of days back, and I quoted that thing. I think it was Fellini. They said that make films about the things you know. So, I mean, I told you about the transgender thing, but it has a very, important... it was an important thing. I was when I was a kid, because I was growing up and I was watching them. So Showgirls of Pakistan, or Zan, the Showgirls of Pakistan. Zan means female in Persian or Urdu. It's about women in performance art, or in especially in circus and smutty Punjabi theater. So those women performing there, they all have very interesting stories, different stories, and when I would go back to my childhood. It's like exploration of my childhood, to be very honest, through my work, I think. I mean, the questions that I had, and it's interesting that, the documentaries kind of provide answers to those questions when I was a kid. my father and my uncles used to watch, and also my brother, and then eventually I as well, because I mean we were all men. We would watch mujras, or like on this cable.
Mujras meaning?
Mujras, those smutty Punjabi dances in those Punjabi theater shows. So we have this kind of small industry in Lahore, or I mean in Punjab. It's a Punjabi theater, which is laden with sexual innuendo, and the dances are kind of, they have dual meanings, and they have really good dances. I mean, I personally love the lyrics because they're so lyrical and they have dual meaning. It's just genius, whoever writes them. So as a kid, I mean, they would watch the drama and they would, of course, I mean, laugh and all of that. But then whenever these women would show up on the screen and they would dance, I mean, they would kind of watch that too. Occasionally they would forward that because it's bad. But it's just that, I mean, they would watch them perform, they would watch them talk in the theater show, and but it's just, it was this kind of feeling of that they were slut shaming them with the kind of dialogue that they were having with themselves. So I mean, you're watching them, you're making them the star. People go and watch them in theater, they pay money, but at the end of the day they're just the whores.
So would you feel as uncomfortable screening Showgirls of Pakistan as you were with Hide and Seek?
I would like to show that film in Pakistan. I mean, as a filmmaker, I would like to show my film anywhere, to be very honest.
But you chose not to show Hide and Seek.
I chose not to show because it was a part of the contract that we signed with, or the release form that we signed with the subjects of the documentary. And it's also, I mean, it's just fair, it's just because you don't want, these people have put their lives at stake to share their lives or their stories with us, and if you put those stories out there, they can be misconstrued, and if they're misconstrued, it can lead to danger to their lives, because they're not rich, they can't save their lives, they can't run out somewhere else.
Right. So
with Showgirls of Pakistan, at least they're women. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's at least they're women, which they are marginalized in their own way. We also have, so the thing is that we have these women in circus and these women in theater, but we also have, we're dealing with transvestites, who I just kind of released some images from the documentary. There's this transvestite person who's getting ready in a male powder room for her theater show, and she's putting her makeup on, and you can see the reflection in the mirror, and there's a guy right next to her who's getting ready as well. I mean, she gets ready in a male powder room, right? And it's just so interesting because they perform and they're as much appreciated as the women, of theater. In circus, at least, you have this one main tent where the performances happen, and then like a few feet away you have the other tent in which the transgender folks, they have strip shows. And I'm talking about, because circus, you don't see circus in cities, you see circus in villages. So it's their entertainment. That's the only source of entertainment to them. So they would be paying like 4 or 5 cents, or maybe more now, to go and watch those shows. And in those performances, you also have to kind of realize that most of the women, actually quite a few of them are Ukrainian and Tajik, and now mixed. So they are performing in one tent, and a few feet away in the other tent you have transgender people stripping to almost nothing.
Why Ukrainian women?
Because almost 20 to 30 years back, circus was kind of big in Pakistan. It was called Lucky Irani Circus. So a lot of Iranian women used to come and perform. A lot of Ukrainian or Tajik
but not from Pakistan, not Pakistani women.
And now you have Pakistani women, like a few of them, but you also have to realize like why they end up there. They, for example, this one girl, she was, they were 2 sisters and their father died, and she talks about like how it kind of they didn't have food for like 4 days, and then they decided, they had this circus performance in their city, and they just went to, they kind of like they wanted to perform there, and now they make at least $400 a month combined, and their
$400
for $400 a month combined, and
that's quite substantial.
That's huge for someone, you know, from the village. But also have to realize they travel from one village to the other. It's so hectic. They have their mother all the time, so she preps them. She makes, you know, kind of she preps them and all of that. And it's just that now she talks about like how they're ostracized from their relatives won't talk to them.
So this is really fascinating. So while they're ostracized by the extended family, the only way in which they can actually survive in this community of circus performers is if they're accompanied by their mother. So they have this understanding from within their family that they will support. Is it because it's some kind of a relationship of dependency on their children?
I think it's an interplay of dependency. I mean, they're dependent on their mom, and mom wants to take care of course she wants to take care of her daughters. So yeah, she preps them, but they also have their brother involved. One of the brothers died in a fire in one of the circus tents. So what they talk about is that although they are kind of ostracized by the relatives, they didn't come to feed them when they were hungry. Why do they have a say now? Why do they tell us that, you know, what we are doing is bad, and we're not good women, and we're not going to get our rishtas. Rishtas as in, you know, they're not going to get
marriage proposals. Yeah.
So that's a big thing for them. At least that was a big thing for their brother. So their brother was like, he always keeps on thinking about that because it's a big thing for him. It's his duty to, you know, get his sisters married, but he can't because no one is willing to marry them because they perform in circus. The other one, for example, was she's a dancer on Punjabi theater. She was widowed, and she had a daughter, and she was not accepted. She was you know, thrown out of her in-laws. She was not accepted into her own parents' home. She ended up into a shrine in Lahore called Data Ganj Baksh, and she was picked up by a pimp, ended up into the red light district, worked there for a while, and then she ended up into theater. There's another girl who actually, but they're not all victimized. You also have to see there's another girl, she took the decision to leave her husband in Karachi, took her son, and came to Lahore and started working in theater, and she's making her own money for her and her kid. She was like, my husband never used to work, and I was like, why should I stay with him? Why should I even like feed him? And I would do whatever I want to do. So I mean, that's also very, you see, empowering. It's also empowering, but also she talks about the girls who have made money in this, especially in theater, they've also been shot at. Mm-hmm. You know, they have given so much to be where they are. And at the end of the day, you have to realize that, quote unquote, they are the whores. You know, at least that's what I kind of learned when I was a kid.
I mean, so that's the impression. That's
the impression.
People's perception.
People's perspective.
Yeah. So it kind of reminds me of the courtesans in South Asia.
Yeah.
So people consider them as very erudite, well-trained artists. And so there's this... You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. But that was at least a century back. Now it's just... It's most of them are not... They didn't go to school, but they're performing. Mm-hmm. They're probably wannabe courtesans. For example, have you seen that film Bothell, in which Iman is like, I mean, she's mimicking whoever from Pakiza, and she's like using all that good language and stuff, but maybe she hasn't been to school. She's just she's a prostitute, but she wants to be like that.
Yeah, yeah. The reason why I was talking about courtesans is because I wanted to sort of highlight the ways in which the courtesans would use their art. You know, they're training in classical music, they're training in poetry, in literature, they're training in music, etc. And they're training in sort of maintaining their the aesthetic beauty. All of this enabled them to become extremely empowered women. So while they were looked down upon by people generally as whores, they were actually not whores. And in fact, when the British came to the country, to India, they consider, or to the Indian subcontinent, they refer to them as whores. But they were actually very refined artists. So in a way, what I'm trying to say over here is that the circus performers, they're using their art in order to survive and become extremely empowered, and they actually do not care about. So we can see the way in which they're very subversive, because they don't care about patriarchy. They reject patriarchy. They don't, they apparently don't need a husband. They don't need apparently a brother to find them a suitable match, etc., etc. So they carve out this very.
But the thought is there, because they have pressure from you have to realize there's just so much pressure from the society. There's so much pressure from their surroundings. Now they're kind of disconnected from their extended families, and that's kind of fine. But there is pressure. There's pressure from their brother, like himself. I mean, he understands and everything, because brother has his own pressures. He has pressures from his surrounding to get his sisters married off. So the pressures are always there, but I get your point. I mean, they are I would say not circus performance per se, but like they're very real in whatever they're doing. They accept both the sides, that they have pressures, but they have to do this in order to survive. But like a woman like Maya, who took the decision to leave her husband, one of the characters in the documentary, she took a decision to leave her husband and come down to Lahore and perform. I think that itself is very subversive, and yeah, that's interesting, like considering the pressures.
Yeah, so you have really been making these fascinating films. And I wonder whether you see yourself as part of a new wave of filmmaking in Pakistan. And before you answer that question, could you give us a very brief description of, the history of Pakistani cinema, the kind of challenges Pakistani cinema faces regionally from India, from Afghanistan, etc.?
Well, I'll try to put it in a nutshell, but I also would like to say that I think it's very early to say that it's a new wave of cinema. And plus, this, unfortunately, the kind of documentaries that I made, they're also, they haven't been shown in Pakistan, so I don't know if I even count as someone who belongs to the new wave, quote unquote.
So then what is this new wave, and how is it different from the...
So let me talk about fiction films. Post-partition, Pakistan kind of bequeathed this kind of very old equipment from India. And they were working on it, and they were like making films, with the help of that equipment for like 20 years or so. And but Indian films were also shown in Pakistan for at least 20 years. And so there was always a competition to be better, because you want to be watched, you want to make money. And
to tell your own stories.
And to tell you, of course, and to tell your own stories. Yeah, and like after the partition or the independence of Bangladesh, there was a ban on Indian films, which meant that Pakistani films did not have any competition no more, because Indian films were not going to be watched. And you have to realize that's the point. That's the era when there was no VCR, there was no DVD, there was no internet. So there's no way you're gonna watch an Indian film, except you get Doordarshan on TV, so you can probably watch really bad reception. If you're lucky, you can get some good reception, and you can watch a good film like Friday night or Saturday night. But not a lot of people get that. I mean, I was in Lahore, so we used to get like bad reception. So I mean, I grew up watching like all of the Govinda what's the other name, the Govinda films, like in the 90s. But so they did not have any competition, which led to Lollywood making really B-grade. Lollywood is Lahore-based film industry. Lahore is a city in Pakistan, so the Pakistani film industry was for so many years called Lollywood, just like the Bombay-based film industry is Bollywood, and the Dhaka-based film industry is Dollywood, and Peshawar-based film industry is Bollywood. I mean, it just all makes sense. So Lollywood started making really bad films because, I mean, there were lack of funds. They were never kind of supported by the government, and they were just doing whatever they were doing. But now at this point, when you don't have competition, by Indian films. No one's watching in Indian film. They would just make B-grade cinema, which led to like a lot of smutty cinema as well. In the 80s, the restrictions came after the coup. Ziaul Haq.
The 1979 coup.
Yeah. And that kind of led to even more restrictions on cinema, and kind of like, I mean, it started going downhill. Then we had this film called Molajat, which was a Punjabi film, which is a regional language, and that led to like the coming 20 years of, you know, filmmaking or films which are trying to emulate that kind of genre.
What genre was that?
The genre was, you know, it's also very sexist because the woman is just dancing in the fields, and the guy is like a rebellious man, and, you know, he's so macho and he's so manly, and the woman is all crazy and she gets kidnapped or something. I don't know, you know, something like that. I mean, that kind of genre, but also in Punjabi language. And you had like 20 years of films trying to emulate that kind of genre. Which meant that they were, because they were in Punjabi, that means that Punjabi regional cinema was taking over Lollywood, which meant that they were pushing away middle class, or, you know, the Urdu-speaking population or whoever, because they would not go to cinemas and watch that. And also because it has a lot of kind of smut going on. So people would not go with their families to watch that in cinemas, which means that it led to shutting of cinemas in Pakistan. So the infrastructure kind of like, you know, fell apart.
And then when did the transition happen?
There's this one more point. So when these films were being made, and in the late 1990s, like, I mean, in the 2000s, they were just so bad that we would have only like 30 films a year, and all of those films were in Punjabi, and only like the working class, mostly men would go and watch that in like very seedy cinemas. The transition kind of happened with, I would say, with a film called was Shoaib
Khuda Ke Liye. In the Name of God.
In the Name of God. It had a big budget and had these big stars, and it was about like
from India as well.
From Nasiruddin Shah was huge, and he, of course, from India. I mean, all the big movies in Pakistan, they've had like you know, technical support from India, artists from India. So
and now people can watch Bollywood films in Pakistan.
That's the point. Now the transition kind of happened when, after at least 15 years of lobbying these cinema people who wanted to open cinema, people who had money, they kind of lobbied and they talked to the government to open cinemas. And after 15 years, to actually allow Indian films to play in cinemas, because they wanted people to go and watch movies. If they go and watch movies, that means the cinemas are making money. The cinemas are making money. There's a cinema culture which is going to revive in Pakistan. So that was the idea, which kind of worked. And there was
always this black market of Bollywood films. People
of
would
course,
smuggle
I mean,
in
Karachi
DVDs.
was like the hub of piracy. So you would have your Bollywood film released in one day, and I mean, there was times that it would even release in Pakistan before that, because it was just leaked.
Yeah.
So we would watch a Bollywood film before people did in cinemas in India, and you also have to realize that how it affected people like me. I mean, I as I told you, I was more used to watching a film on TV or on laptop. The first time I ever watched a film in cinema was when I was 21, which was like a few years back, and I was so uncomfortable, and I still am, because I'm like, how can I sit for like an hour and a half in
goodness.
a big cinema? It's so. The first time I was watching my film in a cinema, I was like so uncomfortable, and I wanted to go out, because it's like a big screen and so many people. You can't sit
still for such a long time.
I can't sit still. I'm like a little ADD, and I want to like.
You haven't been disciplined to sit down in a theater for over 3 hours.
I'm not.
3 hours.
Oh my god! And yes, the Bollywood films are like 3 hours. I can't even imagine like how people sit and, you know, do that.
We start very young.
Yes, you're trained. You know.
I know.
You know, you have that culture. You know, you go to cinemas and it's great, but we'd never had that. I never went to a cinema.
So rather alienating experience,
yeah,
both mentally and physically.
I know. I mean, I even watched one film last night, and me and my friend, I was like, I wanna leave, because the film's not that good, and I don't want to sit here for like that long. We left after half an hour, which is kind of which is so bad. I felt so bad as like a fellow filmmaker to leave someone's film. You know, although it was a big budget, whatever studio film, I shouldn't be feeling bad. But
Maybe
it's just
jealous?
not jealous. It
Yeah.
was such a bad film. It was such a
No, I'm
bad.
talking about the big budget.
Yeah.
Because it's always a struggle getting funding
Of
for your
course,
film.
you're absolutely right.
Okay, so coming back to films like In the Name of God and eventually Bowl by the
Cool.
same
And now we
film.
have these new films. There's
Like
one called
War.
Na Malum Afrad, which means the people who go, people who are nicked by I don't know who, but and they go missing, like the and it's called Na Malum Afrad. It just had a trailer
Nicked by
released.
whom?
By, I don't know, like I can't. Well, I mean, the government or the political
Oh, so
parties.
like,
are who
okay, so the people
Yeah.
that are disappeared.
disappeared, like
Okay.
the unidentified.
All right.
So there's that film. Then you have like
War.
you have VAR, yeah, which is it has a huge budget, like crazy. It's like a B grade Hollywood film. So you got these kind of films, and you also have to realize that why these films are being made because of the reopening of Bollywood cinema in Pakistan, which meant that the cinema kind of culture revived. These people did not go to any cinema for 20-25 years, and it was hard to, and Indian films were the only films because they loved Indian films.
What about Irani cinema?
Irani cinema? We don't have it in cinemas. We have kind of the same social struggle thing going on, but Pakistani, you also have to realize, I mean, they want escapism, so Bollywood kind of sets in. But the new cinema that's coming from Pakistan is kind of like an amalgamation of social kind of struggles along with like the Bollywood masala. So it's like kind of
Masala.
the Bollywood song and dance stuff. Not a lot of films now have song and dance really, but it is a very important part. So I mean, I personally think it's an amalgamation of Iranian cinema with Bollywood cinema, or I think the perfect example would be Turkish cinema. So maybe like 10 years down the line, if everything goes well, it's gonna follow the it's gonna be like Turkish cinema, which has the entertainment value, but also kind of teaches people about or educates or awares them about the social problems.
So it's entertainment plus social critique.
Yeah, I mean, Pakistanis love a film or anything. They love current affairs. Current affairs are huge in Pakistan. So they would always want to watch a film which is based on or has an issue, as which deals with an issue.
Oh, so films that are not meant purely for entertainment.
Oh yeah, they don't do
that's
it that
really
well.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
really
So
really interesting.
yeah, that's the difference. So I mean, I even like I know growing up, these Bollywood films that would totally bomb at the Bollywood box office, they would do really well on DVD in Pakistan because they were based on like issues or
Some
something.
issues.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps a film like Dil Se.
I kind of remember this one called it was artistic. It was called Sur, and which kind of bombed at the Indian box office, but everyone loved it in Pakistan. It was just very artistic and all, and it had to deal with music and maybe like whatever. Maybe it was like, I don't know. It was maybe too avant-garde for the average Bollywood film goer. It was mainstream, but it was a little kind of avant-garde as well.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting insight that you're giving over here, because it sort of allows me to compare the kind of thematic which works well in India, and it wouldn't work well in Pakistan and vice versa, because a lot of the very interesting films that don't do very well in India, you just wonder, why they don't do very well, because the storyline is fascinating in terms of the way in which it pulls out various very important social issues. But they don't do very well because it seemed to be too serious and people just want to watch mundane, boring, not boring from other perspectives. However, but that's really interesting.
But with Pakistan, you have to see, like, I mean, the people are so kind of well aware about current affairs and what's going on.
So are you talking about a particular social class? Are you talking about
No,
certain
I'm talking
regions?
I'm talking about mostly people, because you have terrorism is a big issue. Government's policies are a big issue. Identity is a big issue. Pakistani identity is a big issue. Muslim identity is a big issue.
And now sexuality.
I would like to think that way, but I don't think. I think it's very the narrative or whatever the dialogue is very negative. So I would not say it is an issue, but it is an issue. But it's also, in most of the countries when you have a dialogue about sexuality, you get to hear both the sides. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, if you have a dialogue on TV, which is rare, but you do, it's just grossly negative.
But then isn't there a contradiction between the fact that, the three genders have been identified?
But they're not, the gender it's a spectrum, and sexuality is a spectrum. It's hard, that's why I think it's a farce, because they say it's a third gender, but what is the definition of a third gender? Do they just think that it's the transgender people who fall into the third gender, or do also like gay and lesbian, bisexual people fall into the third gender, which means that they're forcing, eventually I would say that the law would want, which most of the people do, that is the only way you can probably live in these countries, is that if you're gay and if you're flamboyant, you would only be accepted if you cross-dress and, you sing and you beg, which means you turn into a Khwaja Sara, which does not necessarily mean that you're transgender. It just means that you're effeminate, and that's the only way you're accepted. Just like the kind of sex reassignment surgeries, or in Iran has the biggest number of them, because the government kind of prefers for gay people to just turn into women.
Right. Yeah. But at least the legal recognition of the three genders has forced a conversation in this society in a way that it wouldn't have.
At least
talking about identity, when people are talking about their national identity, their citizenship, their problems to do with terrorism and all kinds of sort of political problems, and then suddenly you have the government legalizing the third gender, means that people are becoming aware of.
And also have to realize it's a suo motu decision. So the judiciary of the Supreme Court, they took that decision themselves. So that's also very interesting. At least it's allowing visibility of and also like kind of making people understand and respect the Khwaja Sara community, and allowing them to run in elections. So I think that's the biggest outcome of it. Mm-hmm. You have to realize no one's going to opt for that. No kind of sane person is going to opt for that option on an ID card when you don't have the same option on your passport.
Which is a contradiction.
Which is, yeah.
Hugely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes left now, and do you have any thoughts on where is it that your filmmaking career is going to take you? How do you see yourself? What kind of films you're going to be able to make?
very honest, the term filmmaker just makes me so uncomfortable, because it comes with so much pressures, and I don't even have the money to make so many films. I just consider myself a storyteller. And I would like to tell stories in whichever way, with whichever medium I can, which is available, which is inexpensive, because I said I don't have money to make films. So I tell stories through audio, through writing. I started with writing, and now I make documentaries. It's mostly guerrilla, and it's just raw stories. And I would call myself a storyteller, and I would like to keep on telling, people's stories, or allow them to tell stories. At least in hide and seek's case, it's their stories. They're telling their stories. I have nothing to do with that. I can comment on it now because I know those people for so many years, but it's their stories. It's from their perspective. I'm just giving them a way to tell their stories to the world.
And do you want to talk to us about you seeing yourself as a guerrilla filmmaker?
I think that the approach that we took for the first documentary, and maybe for the second one as well, although we wanted to be really systematic, but that's probably the only way that you can shoot on these kind of subjects. Excellent. Because you don't have a permit. You don't have a permit. You don't want to be very visible. You don't want the authorities to ask questions. You don't know what your next step is. So I would say it's total guerrilla. It's total run and gun. At least in hide and seek's case, it was. I didn't know what was gonna be when we would stop and what is my next step. So you at that, but it's also very interesting because that takes you to a gay bar in under like in the basement of a mosque somewhere in Shadman in Lahore. So it's also, so I mean it's interesting, you know. You never plan those things. It's just that.
Well, thank you very much, Saad Khan. We have had this very interesting conversation with this very young very young and radical Pakistani filmmaker who is visiting Seattle all the way from Islamabad. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.